So in episode 3, we get a better idea of what happened to Klaus. Upon arriving in the 60s, he got kicked out of a restaurant for not being able to pay his bill and ends up charming an old white rich woman. And she was the owner of the house that he was sleeping in. And Klaus uses his powers to fool these people into thinking that he's a god, having Ben pick him up. But to everybody else, it looks like he is levitating. In 1961, he travels to Baja, Mexico, and picks up some more followers. In 62, he heads to India and picks up even more. And in 63, he heads to California, but at this point, he's burnt out and doesn't want to do this anymore. And that's when he picks up and heads back to Dallas, Texas. Now we'll get back to present day, where Diego was saved by Lila, who was following him and found him lying in the alley. And she's brought him back to Elliot's place and is patching him up, but he's in pretty rough shape. And when 5 shows up, he unties Elliot, and Elliot has set up a bunch of equipment to track electrical anomalies, and one of the pieces of equipment starts picking up something on sound waves. And that's because Vanya, when she took the car, ended up running into the Swedes who tried to kill her, but she ended up fleeing into a cornfield. And she does end up running into one of the Swedes, but instinctively uses her power to push him back and get away. And she's been hiding in this cornfield ever since. And because of Elliot's radar, number 5 is able to find her the next morning, where he introduces himself as her brother. But at the moment, he doesn't really have a whole lot of time to discuss what's going on. He just wants to get out of there and away from the Swedes. So he gives her the options of either staying here and running into the IKEA Mafia or coming with him. And she doesn't understand why they're coming after her, and he explains how you're not supposed to be in 1963. And as they're walking back to number 5's car, you're able to see the destruction that Vanya's powers caused in the field. So Vanya and 5 head to a diner where 5 asks, "Do you really not remember anything?" And she says, "No, I remembered being dropped off in that alley and being hit by a car, and that's about it." So 5 explains everything and how the world's going to end, her whole backstory, and it's a lot to take in. So she runs to make a phone call to Sissy, who is dealing with the fact that Harlan is having an episode after the record player broke. But Sissy is just relieved to be hearing from Vanya. Vanya apologizes for stealing the car, but explains how she ran into her younger brother. And that's when 5 hangs up the phone on her, and she's pissed at first, but 5 goes, "We have 8 days to save the world. And those guys in the field, they're going to continue to come for us. So we need to stick together and find the rest of our brothers and sisters and find out how to stop the apocalypse." And while 5 was explaining to Vanya the severity of the situation, Diego wants to go after Reginald Hargraves. He feels like Reginald is in the middle of what happened to Kennedy. But he's also pissed off because he feels like Reginald cheap-shotted him by shanking him like that. And Lila reminds him, well, the good news is he doesn't know that he's your dad. He then asks Lila, "Why were you following me?" And she explains that she felt like he was leaving her because that's seemingly what everybody does. And when she found him lying in the alley, it reminded her of when she found her parents lying face down dead, and that was at the age of 4. That's something she's never told Diego before. And after this heart-to-heart, the two end up hooking up. Now, Luther woke up that day, and after finding out that Vanya was around, he's got Allison just running through his head. When he arrives at Jack's club that day, Jack reminds him that he has a big fight that night, and he's worried about him, wondering if he's going to be mentally ready for it. Because Jack is putting a lot of money on this fight, but Luther says, yeah, I'll be ready. By the way, you have those people that can find other people. Can you find somebody for me? And he writes down Allison Hargraves on a napkin and gives it to Jack, and Jack says, "Is this like your ex or something?" And Luther says, "Yeah, something like that." And Allison is trying to find somebody of her own, but that happens to be Klaus, and she's been able to locate where he's staying, and Klaus is thrilled to see her because they haven't seen each other in 3 years. And Klaus tells her what he's been up to, and she tells Klaus how she remarried, and she's now a political activist. She also no longer uses the "I heard a rumor" trick because it took her over a year to regain the ability to talk. Eventually, her husband comes up, and Klaus remembers that name, saying, "I served time with that guy." And Klaus feels like he should help get him out of jail. After meeting with Klaus, Allison heads over to her salon where she's supposed to host a meeting with her civil rights group. And they've been planning on doing a sit-in, but with Ray in jail, some people don't think that they should do it. And Allison reminds everybody that with Kennedy coming to town in a couple days, they're never going to have more cameras on the town than right now. And now is the time to have a sit-in. So after a little bit of back and forth, everybody's in unison that they will do the sit-in that day. And while Allison was having that meeting, Klaus and Ben head over to the police station, and Ben uses his powers to type on a typewriter, "Release Raymond Chestnut or die." And that scares the hell out of the cops, so they end up releasing Raymond, who comes out of lockup and sees Klaus there and is shocked, saying, "You're the one who got me out?" But Klaus says, "Hey man, anything for family." And Ray just thinks this is a phrase, but Klaus says, "No, you're my brother-in-law." Yeah, family cookouts are about to get wild. Klaus and Ben then head over to a hardware store where Ben realizes why they went back to Dallas, and that's because of Dave. Dave was Klaus's Vietnam lover, and even though this young version of Dave has no idea who Klaus is thrilled to see him after Dave died in his arms. But Ben thinks that this is very selfish what he's doing. He thinks he's going to screw with Dave. And a stressed out Klaus snaps at Ben saying that Dave told him he enlisted for the military the day that Kennedy got shot, and that's in a few days. So if he can somehow convince this kid not to enlist, maybe he can save his life. So Raymond heads home, but what he finds is Luther on his doorstep because Luther has gotten the address from Jack Ruby's contacts. Although when he sees Raymond, he thinks that he's at the wrong house and says, yeah, I'm looking for Allison Hargraves. And Raymond says, no, her name's Allison Chestnut now. That's my wife. And this has Luther shook. He can't believe that she remarried. And Raymond says how Allison mentioned she had family up north, but nobody that looked like you. Although Raymond then gets a phone call that the sit-in is on and he has to leave. And he asks Luther, hey, do you want me to leave a message for Allison? And he says, yeah, just let her know that I need to talk to her. The whole time, not taking his eyes off the wedding pictures. So Luther heads on to the fight that night, but he is not in the right mindset. And he's fighting a guy that he could easily defeat. I mean, he could break this guy in half by sneezing. But because of what happened that day, he just wants to feel pain. And he begs the guy to keep punching him. And this isn't just in front of Ruby, because Vanya and Five have also shown up. And they're wondering what the hell's going on with Luther. But the guy does what he's told, and he keeps punching Luther in the face until finally he knocks him out and wins the fight. And Ruby leaves pissed off, having lost a lot of money, as Luther is just lying on the ground staring up at his former home, the moon. And this all has to do with Allison, who is going through the sit-in at the same restaurant that kicked her out the day that she arrived in the 60s. And Raymond shows up late, but he's also not in the right headspace. And Allison can sense the fact that something's wrong with Ray. And he says, yeah, well, I just had a hell of a day. I mean, this crazy guy bailed me out and said that he's my brother-in-law, and then the biggest guy I've ever seen is sitting on my doorstep, and he also says that he's your brother. But while they're having this conversation, one of the guys that works at the restaurant pushes a cup of hot coffee on Allison's lap, and that's when all hell breaks loose, with the cops busting in and arresting a bunch of people, and also beating the hell out of Ray. And Allison's begging the cops to stop, but they're not. So finally she just says, I heard a rumor that you walked away, and the cop walks away. But this is in front of Ray. And this is the second time that Ray has heard her say, I heard a rumor, but now he's seeing the powers. And this, on top of the family that seemingly popped up out of nowhere, has Ray wondering, who the hell are you? Ray tries to get away from Allison, and Klaus runs in and says, no, Allison, we gotta go right now, and pulls her away. Now that same night, as Diego is sleeping, having no idea what's going on with his brothers and sisters, Lila wakes up in the middle of the night and heads to a pet store. And she starts fishing around in one of the fish tanks and finds a hotel room key. And when she heads to the hotel room, she asks the other person there, hey, can I order room service? And that's when the handler walks out saying, yeah, sure, you earned it. And Lila says, thanks, Mom. Thank you for watching this recap. If you do not see the next one up in the corner right there on the end screen, don't worry, it'll be up shortly. Please consider following the channel. That'd be cool. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. And if you don't, there's a thumbs down button for a reason.